What's good, everyone? Welcome to the Mana Dorks channel. I'm Mike.
And I'm Nick.
And today we have a special guest. We are welcoming Chain of Commander to our episode. Chain, welcome to the show.
Howdy. Thank you for having me.
Chain produces some great content on YouTube, and we've had some great conversations already in the 10 minutes that we've been video chatting. So we're excited to bring you even more Magic thoughts.
Yeah, we're super excited.
So, Chain, we're really interested to just get to know you as a Magic player. So would you mind telling us about how you got into Magic?
All right. I started playing Magic just before M15 released. So I think that was, about 2014. So started in Standard, eventually made my way over to Modern, which eventually got me over to Legacy. And that eventually got over to when I started dating a girl that primarily only played Commander. And that's kind of where we're at right now, just because Commander is the easiest format to play without there being in-person meetups, thanks to Spell Table and things of the like. So, just been doing a lot of that. Decided to hunker down, make a YouTube channel out of it, just because I was a bit bored during quarantine. And now I'm here on your channel,
Fantastic.
being interviewed. That's kind of cool.
It is.
Yeah.
It's very cool. Yeah. Same thing here. We started this during quarantine as well. We were like, we talk about Magic all the time. Might as well record what we have to say.
Yeah.
So,
We weren't doing anything else, so.
I'm interested to hear that you started in 60-card formats. Can you talk just a little bit about that transformation from 60-card with 4 copies to 100-card singleton?
It's and when it comes down to it, Magic is Magic, and what cards you see at any given time are randomized anyway. So having a difference between 4 copies in a deck and singleton formats isn't really. You still play the game the same way. It's not like, so it would only work if I had 3 more copies of Hedron Alignment, though I guess it would be true if I got 3 more copies of Hedron Alignment. But it's all the same mechanics. It's all the same game. It's all the same strategy. It's not all the same strategy. You got more opponents to worry about, but it's 98% the same.
Yeah, and
so the transfer from one to another, it was inconsequential. It was just, and you can go back and forth really easy. It's not like, I'm so enfranchised in Commander now, I can never go back to other constructed formats. Just pick up the other deck, jump back into it.
Absolutely. And there's 23,000 cards in Magic currently. So you're bound to find cards that repeat and do this almost the same thing. So if you really want, you can technically kind of get around that and run 4 copies of a card, because there's 4 copies that do what Nantuko Husk does. So if you want that kind of effect, there are ways to get that in.
There's even cards that say you can have as many as you want. I actually did both a video and a deck tech on that about cards that break the singleton rule of Commander. So for you watching at home, if you guys want to check it out on the channel.
Fantastic.
Yeah, definitely check that out.
Do you have any favorites that kind of break that rule? Rule.
My CDC deck uses Rat Colony. Pretty much the rats in general. The Shadowborn Apostle deck was always kind of neat, but never really caught my interest. But I like the rats, so Relentless Rats and Rat Colony. Those are probably my favorite.
Very cool.
Shadowborn Apostle's too expensive.
Yeah, he's $4 a piece now, and you need at least like 23, 24 to make the deck operate the way that it's supposed to. So you're investing $100 right there in just 25, a quarter of the deck.
And then you need demons to go with it. So it gets to be a lot. But rats are so powerful. We've both talked about building rat decks before.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
They're a lot of fun. If you needed any bit more evidence to push you into actually doing it, I would recommend it. The Sidisi deck was my favorite new deck that I built in 2020. And it's just an absolute blast to play.
Great. Now, just confirming, is that Sidisi Undead Vizier or Brood Tyrant?
Brood Tyrant.
Okay.
Tyrant. So it's a Sultai, stealth mill, bunches of rats, zombies. It can only win in combat damage.
Yeah.
We know how that goes. All right. Well, Shane, great to get to know you. We have a lot more questions for you, but we do want to move into our segment of Randomander. For those that don't know Randomander, we go on to EDH Rec and select the random commander button, the first one that we find. We just try to build a deck for it. Not a full deck, obviously.
We just try to justify it as being a possible commander.
Absolutely. Nick, click that button for us. Tell us what we got.
All right, let's see. I don't know how to say that. I think it's Caravec.
Yeah.
Caravec the Spiteful.
Caravec the Spiteful.
Yeah.
Let's read it. 2
and 2 black for a human warlock, a 3/2, and it says other creatures get -1/-1.
Ooh.
That's a tough
I was actually a little bit excited when this Caravec was spoiled. Not for a commander, because as a commander it is a little bit tough.
Yeah.
Just having a symmetrical effect. But in the 99, it is actually pretty solid in a variety of builds. I know that I had it queued up for what's her face? The Golgari lady who makes power toughness of target creature equal to 1 until end of turn.
Oh, one of the hyphenated ones. I think I know what you're talking about. I can't think of it right now. You tap to change the power toughness to 1.
Yes, I will have an answer for you shortly as I'm logging into all my deck building accounts.
Well, that's a great point, though, because Caravec's just static ability of reducing the power and toughness would work really well with that commander to change its power toughness to 1.
Body Ildal, that's what I was thinking.
Okay. I love that idea. I thought you were
Go ahead.
I thought you were going to go a different way with this. I recently built a Shirai Shizo's Caretaker deck, which cares about creatures with power 1 or less hitting the graveyard so that they can come back to the battlefield. So I'm honestly thinking about having this on the battlefield so that when I play my 1/1s that care about dying, they die right away, and then they come back to the battlefield and then die right away again. Kind of just like don't even need a sacrifice outlet at that point. They're just like automatically going to die.
Yeah, but once again, that's just putting it in the 99. How do we make a commander out of it?
Exactly, that's the point.
You don't. So it's not uncommon for us to get a couple of garbage fire commanders in this segment.
Some of the we've gotten some commanders from Legends that are just like straight vanilla commanders, and it's like, okay, I guess we have to try to figure out how to work with this.
I don't know. I think you're right. It does work better in the 99 as opposed to in the zone.
I will say that it gives all creatures -1/-1.
Yes.
So Nick plays tokens out the wazoo. So like, I know that this would work really well against his Riz deck because he'd have to get rid of Riz. Otherwise, you can't make any tokens.
Right.
Yes.
So kind of like an anti-Anthem.
It's essentially... I mean, there's a lot of effects in Magic's history. Black is the effect of symmetrical minus effects over the course of a game. Whether they be static or just one times in the form of like Toxic Deluge or something like that. So, like, if you want to go spice and go for more of a thematic build, he could be your commander. Then you could just load up with things like Dread of Night and things that just gives everything static minus abilities and not really have much of a game plan behind it outside of maybe playing much larger creatures that can get around it.
Yeah. Yeah, and then I guess stacking those minus effects so that even your opponent's 3/3s can't stay on the board.
Yep, they all just fall down.
Okay. I like that idea. And black is good for card draw and some sort of ramp, or at least mana doubling. So wouldn't be tough to get up to those bigger creatures that could stay on the battlefield.
Yeah. And because you have so many minus effects, you can probably keep the board relatively clear in the meantime. Because what's that one? Like you have access to Massacre Room still that can fit in there. You get that demon from Aether Revolt.
Is that Carnifex Demon? Are you talking about Carnifex Demon?
No,
I think that one puts -1/-1 counters on creatures.
The one from Aether Revolt is everything is -2/-2 until a turn, and for everything that dies, you get an energy counter, and then you can pay X amount of energy to reanimate something for you.
Okay, I can't think of the demon name. They're all like Archfiend of Despair or things like that, you know. But I know what you're talking about. Just that static ability of just depleting the creature's power and toughness. Great. Shane, how would you win with this commander?
That is an excellent question. I'll get back to you on that one.
I feel like in this you kind of have to just go black good stuff to win. Exsanguinates and things like that, maybe to win in that regard. Win with spells rather than combat damage.
Yeah,
right.
That's very likely, especially because combat damage would take forever if everything's getting debuffed. That's the thing about black. When all else fails, you can just use extreme mana production to exsanguinate, Torment of Hellfire, and stuff like that as a win con. So
that's true.
It would just be black good stuff with a
little bit of spice
debuff sub theme. Yeah.
Fantastic. Cool. All right. Thanks, Chain, for your thoughts. Yeah, please let's move on. Our main topic of the day is Q&A with Chain of Commander. We have a ton of questions written down, and we're all going to give our thoughts on them. So I'm really excited to see what we feel. Nick, you want to read our first question?
Sure. What are your top 3 favorite decks to play?
Are we, just to clarify, this is going to be all specifically Commander, right?
Yes. Thank you for clarifying. We're a Commander channel, so thank you. We're talking about Commander here.
Well, other than the aforementioned Sidisi, which still is in my top 3, I have a lot of fun deck. Gen has been proving to be pretty fun, but I don't know if he's top 3 in fun. Tuvasa is definitely one of my favorite decks to play. Drawing cards is one of my favorite things to do, and Tuvasa does a very, very good job drawing cards. I would say my top 3 in order. No particular order, rather, would be Tuvasa, Sidisi Brood Tyrant, and Tyam Luminous Enigma.
Ooh.
Cool.
Very cool.
Yes.
Nick, I do want to pass it to you next.
So in my list is also Tuvasa the Sunlit. So I'm kind of curious as to how our decks differ, but maybe that's a future topic. And then I'd probably say Riz the Redeemed, my tokens. And a third one, it's kind of tough because those are the only 2 decks I tend to play. Maybe Krufix, God of Horizons.
I do have a Krufix deck. It is my completely foil deck. It's really more of an art project than a deck at this point. But I want to go back to you said Riz tokens. I spent a long time trying to make a Selesnya token deck work for me. I started with Tristani, and then that didn't do it for me. The original Tristani, not the new one. The original Tristani, then I'm like, I need to add red in here because I want access to things like Perforos and
Impact Tremors.
Impact Tremors, yep. So I eventually went with the pairs, Tana and Sidar, and that didn't do it for me. So then I went to the Geared deck came out, so I grabbed Geared. I tried Geared for a while. That didn't do it for me. And I ended up settling on, of all commanders, Zazan Tamar.
Really?
Essentially the strictly worse Avenger of Zendikar, but in the command zone. And he's kind of been leading the helm ever since.
You haven't tried Riz yet?
I haven't tried Riz just because I had some issues with Selesnya as a color pairing in Commander as a whole. It didn't have specific answers for things I would frequently encounter. Like, there was no way a Selesnya could ever beat Cyclonic Rift, especially when you're doing tokens, because everything's just back in your hand and just great. Yeah. But at least with red, now you have access to putting in things like Pyroblast and Red Elemental Blast and some other ways to try to get around. So,
okay. I guess I didn't really have a defense in mind when I built the deck. I was just kind of like, I want an explosive token deck, and Riz is what's going to.
No, if you want, I just ran into I wanted that too, but then I live in a meta where people want to remove everything frequently over and over again. I just had to start designing my deck accordingly to at least give me a chance. And that introduced the red, but
I guess I have it easy because sometimes Mike feels bad after the 3rd time he's removed Riz and doesn't remove it anymore.
Sometimes
it's just too easy to play and too easy to remove.
No, he goes really quick. Just like he's a 1-drop. How many 1-drop commanders are there? I think there's
7, maybe.
Not a lot.
Yeah.
And it's definitely, I think, one of the more powerful ones of the 1-drop commanders.
Oh, easily.
Definitely.
Interesting that you guys have very similar, at least commander ideas. You've talked about 3 decks, or at least deck styles that you've shared, so that's really interesting. For my 3 decks, my top 3 decks, I would have to say my Gitrog monster deck, sacrifice lands and just landfall everything. It's my favorite deck. Zada Hedron Grinder, make tons of tokens, pump them all up, and kill you by turn 6, hopefully. And I would have to say it does happen. It happened last night.
Yeah.
And my last favorite deck is probably Sasaya Orochi Archmage. I don't know if you know Sasaya. She's one of those flip commanders from Kamigawa, the ones that like rotate 180 degrees. She's a 2/3, and you reveal your hand, and if there are 7 lands in your hand, you flip her, and then she turns into an enchantment.
Okay, that's the green one, right? Yeah.
Yes, she says that your lands tap for as much mana as there are lands that share a name with that land. So I run 48 forests in that deck. So I have 7 in my hand, and I have 6 on the battlefield. So I flip her, and then each one of my lands taps for 6. So big creatures, lots of activated abilities in that deck. Like Ant Queen works great in that deck. It's just so fun. Nick hates it.
I hate it. It's almost as bad as Runetail.
Do you know Runetail? Runetail, Kitsune Ascendant.
Ascendant, yep.
Yep.
The one that your stuff doesn't take damage or something.
Mm-hmm.
And every time we play, he gets Pariah and an indestructible creature, and then I can't do anything for the rest of the game.
No, nothing can be dealt damage unless he can like exile or destroy it. Then
yeah, it's ridiculous.
So fantastic. Well, I think we should move on to our next question. We have a lot for you.
Yeah.
So what do you have, Nick?
We'd like you to rank the colors in Magic from worst to best.
Interesting.
Or I shouldn't say worst, least best.
Yeah. Every color has its benefits. Though I would say, as mentioned earlier, Selesnya as a pairing is difficult to have answers to specific things. I would say white would probably be last, and I don't think anybody's going to be really surprised by that. So I'd probably go white, red, and then black would be in the middle of the stack. And I'd put blue in second, and then green in outright first. I just don't know. Like, mono green decks can almost do everything at this point.
Yeah.
So they ramp, they draw.
Exactly.
What else do you really need at that point?
Right.
So I'm almost right there with you, except I would go red, white, black, blue, green.
I know. My mono red deck's better than my mono white deck. So that's what kind of gave it a little bit of an edge. But like those two at that point, they're just definitely far and away lacking of some things that the other colors have access to. So,
yeah,
I'm gonna totally disagree with you guys, at least somewhat. I do have white at the bottom, definitely, but then in fourth place I have blue, and then red, black, then green.
Why so low with the blue?
Why so low with the blue? I understand that blue has a ton of answers for everything. Back to what you said about your mono-colored decks, my mono-red deck is much better than my mono-blue deck. I have a couple mono-blue decks that I run, actually, and each of my mono-red decks would beat those decks 4 turns earlier. Just like they're so much quicker, and even in a multiplayer game, I prefer to play a mono red deck than a mono blue deck. Maybe it's my own personal preference, but I like the way red works more than blue. It's more obstacles, and you have to kind of puzzle things together, where I think blue is more straightforward. So I prefer to play red.
All right.
But we're all in agreement on green at the top because obviously, duh.
It's too good.
Yeah. Thanks, Jane.
So much.
What do we have next?
We have, what are some of your pet cards?
All right. I got several. I got a lot. And people who watch my channel, they know quite a few of them. Boomerang has mono blue removal. Huge fan. Commit to Memory, mono blue removal, reloading your hand. Huge fan. Murderous Cut is essentially a single black to destroy target creature in a lot of situations. Huge fan. Trapped on Thin Ice. That's that little aura that can enchant a snowland.
Oh, yeah.
And then exile a creature for as long as it's around. Love that card.
So good.
So many of them. And then, like, I tried building a deck of pet cards. It didn't really work because the colors didn't really match up.
Because they're
but
pet cards.
my mono blue deck did involve putting in a lot of my favorite mono blue pet cards for the sake of just having pet cards in there. And it's really janky. It was built on a budget. It's only like $150 deck total, even after some expensive upgrades and pieces of it spiking when Kaldheim was announced. But
cool,
interesting. A lot of pet cards. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
that's the thing. I like to find new ones. Like when Commander Legends came out, Wheel of Misfortune very quickly became one of my favorite cards from that set.
Yeah.
And I like putting it in a lot of my decks now. So
chaotic.
Yeah.
Neat. Nick, you want to take it?
Sure. So just a couple of mine. Beastmaster Ascension, favorite card of Magic. Market Festival, favorite ramp.
Market Festival.
Market Festival is the one that you enchant a land, and you can when you tap it for
mana.
mana.
Yep, taps for the gods.
Yeah, taps for 2 in any combination of colors.
Returning to next rather.
What's another one of mine?
Soul Warden.
Soul Warden. I would say that Soul Warden or Essence.
Yeah,
Warden.
having a Soul Sisters.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
definitely.
What are some of yours, Mike?
My favorite card of all time is Nantuko Husk.
Yeah.
It was the first card that I put in to my first deck. So obviously it has a special place in my heart, but responsive sacrifice, pumping up a creature, I just think there's a lot you can do with it. So Nantuko Husk,
having a repeatable free sack outlet is never something to be trifled with.
Right. Especially in a token deck, you swing with all your tokens and Nantuko Husk, and they don't block Nantuko Husk for some reason. You can just sack all your tokens to it and hit them for 18 or 20. So that's my favorite one. I have Ranging Raptors from Ixalan. Whenever it's dealt damage, you search for a basic land and put it on to play tapped. I just think that's very cool, really deterring for your opponents not to swing at you so you don't get that extra ramp. I don't know if I can think of any others.
It's hard to think of them right on the spot.
Yeah. And pet cards that aren't like staples. Like, of course, I'd say like Swords to Plowshares or, something like that. But obviously.
They're just cards that probably shouldn't go in the deck, may not work well in the deck, but you put them in anyway because you love them so much.
I will say another one of mine might be Black Cat. Just a 1 and a black for a 1/1. When it dies, target opponent discards a card. The foil that I have of it is beautiful and just so simple, straightforward, kind of exactly what you would expect from a Black Cat. I think that's really cool.
Cool.
Yeah.
Got some good stuff in there.
Yeah.
So what do we got next for you? We have, what is your ideal play style, like kinds of decks that you build?
Like Aristocrats, Landfall, Burn, things in that nature.
Okay. Yeah, no, it's not as easy to just categorize it in an archetype like that. Most of the time, I would say combo. Like being just a lot of my early turns are just used to set up, and then late in the game, I just do 1 or 2 very explosive turns to win the game. But really, anything that has me drawing a lot of cards, I'm perfectly fine playing with, or putting cards in my graveyard to use later. I built a couple of graveyard decks towards the end of 2020, and they've both been absolutely fantastic, though one of them needs a little bit more tuning. I begin. But really, just let me draw cards.
Yeah.
Let me draw cards. All I want to do is draw cards and feel okay. But I would say as far as gameplay, game style, late game combo, early game setup, drawing a bunch of cards, and then either doing something like Ice Crown combo later in the game or something like that is pretty fun. But second place, I put loading up the graveyard and then just slowly getting incremental value from your graveyard over the course of the game using something like Tyam or Gan, Sidisi and stuff like that. So
Sure.
Cool.
Neat. We got to play a game at some point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
I'm really interested.
I'm always up to play games. It comes down to scheduling, but I invested in this very fancy spell table setup over here for a reason, because I want to play with people.
Neat.
Yeah.
Let's get it on. Let's do it sometime.
Yeah.
That'd be awesome. Nick, take it away. What do you got?
Voltron all the way.
Voltron.
Yeah, 90% of my decks are Commander Voltron. But it's like a what did we call it last night? Like an alternate or an alternative Voltron strategy.
Unconventional Voltron.
Unconventional. So I'm not like, attaching a bunch of equipments, auras, whatever, to my creature to pump it up. I'm pumping it up in different ways.
Well, yeah, you play Grimgrin, the
right.
zombie one, so that's like +1/+1 counters, Voltron, basically.
Yeah.
But you have an unconventional way of getting there.
Right.
Is basically what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's hard to explain, but if you play with us sometime, you'll see.
It's hard to play against.
It's also hard to get back up when your only thing is removed, your only Voltron. Yeah.
Yeah, so I've always been a bit wary of Voltron for that reason. I don't like having no backup plan.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But
that's fair.
What do you got, Mike?
I think at its essence, I'm an aristocrats player. Whether it's sacrificing lands or creatures or even artifacts at some point, that's what I really like to do. Build up a board state and then say, you can try to attack me, but I have a ton of responses on board. So let's see what happens. Like I play a Teysa Karlov deck, and you just set up the board with things that when they die, you get a ton of benefit from. So it's like, if you want to try to remove my things, go ahead. If you want to try to block my things, go ahead. They're going to die, and I will still get benefit. So I've really enjoyed playing aristocrats. I do have to piggyback on what you said. Just let me draw cards. I've built a couple decks that win with Laboratory Maniac, just drawing out of my deck so that I win. There was one game I played against Nick and one of our friends where I'm drawing through the deck. I'm like, oh yeah, this is exactly how I want it to go. And I get to my last card and I'm like, guys, this last card is Laboratory Maniac. How cool is that? And I draw the last card and it's actually not Laboratory Maniac.
It was a spell book.
It was a spell book giving me no maximum hand size. I had forgotten that I took the Laboratory Maniac out and put it in another deck to use another night before. So it never got back in the deck. So I lost.
It was pretty awesome.
It's a good story, is what it is.
I've had sometimes forgetting that Laboratory Maniac wasn't in the deck.
Mm-hmm.
So
a little embarrassing, especially when the last card just doesn't help at all.
Yeah, a spell book.
Yeah. Cool. Chain, great to know. I'd love to play a game together. We'd love to move on to our Thought Scour topics. Thought Scour is a series that we have on our channel where we just come up with a question and have a deep conversation about it. Nick, what have we asked so far?
So on our first episode, we asked, is there anything wrong with net decking? What do you think about that?
To which I say no. You're not expected to figure out how to invent the wheel on your own before you build the rest of your car.
Yeah.
Something's already been done. You need a point to start. I mean, brewing is fun and all, but for a lot of people who are just wanting to get in the game, just want to build something, net decking is where you go. You look, you make a list, play with the list, and as you play with the list, you'll figure out what you like and don't like about it and start changing it accordingly as your experience with the deck goes on. But it'd be a fool of anybody to say, you must build this deck, but you must not use any resources available to you to figure out how or what it should be. Just pick a starting point. Because a good solid chunk of my decks started as a net deck and then brutally got changed as time went on. Like, they are mere shadows of the first drafts that they started as, but I needed that point to start. I needed that net deck. I needed that 100 list, and I might not have even have built that list as 100. I might have just imported it into an online web builder and then just added and removed things accordingly. But there is nothing wrong with net decking. It's just a starting point. Mm-hmm. But I do encourage people who do net deck to add your own flair to the deck as time goes on. Figure out what you like, what you don't like. Add cards you want to try. Take out cards you hate. Change your deck. Commander's fluid. There's always new decks being pumped out. It's only a matter of time before every net deck just turns into your own little creation.
And that's almost exactly what we said. We also compared net decking to pre-constructed decks that you buy.
Exactly, yeah.
Because what's the difference there? People have a problem with net decking, but then they'll go out and buy a pre-con deck. Like, it's the same thing. Mm-hmm. Somebody else is building the deck.
Somebody else made that list, not you.
Right.
But that's fine.
Right.
There's nothing wrong.
And we said that it is just a basis for you to start from, especially for newer players. No way you're supposed to be able to just make a 100-card deck, because then at that point, if you're a new player and you have to make your own deck, it might not work very well, and then you'll get a bad taste in your mouth for the game. And then we just lost someone who would have been a great member of the community. So net decking, great place to start and just build up from.
Definitely.
Cool.
I'm glad we're all on the same page. That was
Me
easy.
too. Go ahead.
So our next one was, where are we? Are the 5 colors sticking to their color identities, or are they melding?
That was kind of tough to say, because like the idea of being able to divide every aspect of pretty much the universe into a 5-color identity is a pretty challenging concept to begin with. And there's definitely going to be situations where the difference between maybe one color and another is just so hair thin that you might look in that and be like, oh, that doesn't count as green's color identity. But in reality, with the philosophy behind it, it might. That said, I do believe some aspects of color identity need to be explored more before we go back and work with, like, white and card draw has been a recent one that's been coming up quite frequently. The fact that white has very difficult card draw access, but recently they've been printing things like Mangara the Diplomat, which give you card draw based off of things your opponents do. And I believe that it's worth taking the time to let white flesh that out a bit more before we go back to green and say, here's another card that gives you a card for playing a creature. So like it's I think that all the colors are more or less still within their identity at the time, but I think we need to take the time to focus more on some colors' weaknesses to clarify how they can handle specific mechanics of the game before we keep on going and just like treating all other colors equal. Because at this time, they're really not. They need the other colors need a little bit more help before we can go back to green.
That's very true.
So what sparked this conversation was we saw that they released the what was it, the black enchantment removal.
Oh, Feed the Swarm.
Feed the Swarm.
Yep.
And people were a little PO'd about it because black doesn't do that. But we kind of...
Black doesn't do that because black hadn't done that up to that point. There's nothing in its color identity that says black can't handle enchantments. In fact, when Morrow brought that up, he said, okay, red can handle artifacts. Why can't black handle enchantments?
Yes.
Blue just bounces everything. White can handle both. Green can handle both. It's perfectly reasonable that red can handle one, black can handle the other. So it's how they go about handling it, not the fact that you are removing an enchantment in black, but the fact that you are losing life to do so. That is black's way of doing things.
And that's what we had said.
To have an effect.
We said that while you can just draw cards straight in blue, in black you have to draw cards and lose life or sacrifice a creature. Like, it still sticks to its color identity in that way, while being able to still play the game. Basically, we have to be able to draw cards.
Color identity shouldn't matter on the mechanics of the game. It should just matter about how it goes about achieving those mechanics, how it goes about drawing cards, how it goes about removal, stuff like that. Color will determine how it does that, not the fact that whether it should or should not do that.
I love that. I love that statement.
I think we came to the overall conclusion that each color can do everything, but one color is going to do it the best, you know? So,
yeah,
like you were saying with the black draw and lose.
Absolutely.
So
great. Thanks, Shane.
what do we got next?
Finally,
go ahead.
All right.
It.
Last Thought Scour topic was what are the most powerful, very subjective, the most powerful keywords?
We came up with 5 in our show.
So keywords being the ones that just pop up in every set. So things like vigilance and lifelink, death touch, and
so we're looking at the evergreen stuff. We're not looking at individual sets, because otherwise I would say split second by a clear mile.
We started talking about that. We dove more into the mechanics, and we were like, okay, we should probably just keep it keywords because it can get too misconstrued here. So keywords, yes.
I would say haste would be up there, just because there's a lot of decks that, especially when you have to go full turn cycles before you can attack with 3 other people. Mass removal should be played, so you want to make sure you get it before that. So I'm going to say haste in Commander is one of the big ones. Death touch, I would say, would be another one, because it pretty much turns any creature into a removal spell. some amount of evasion. That just any evasion piece, so whether it be flying, menace, skulk, trample, something like that. I would say out of those, I think menace would probably be the best one to kind of affect combat math. So what do we got? So we got menace. We got what were the other ones I said?
Death touch,
haste, and death touch. Yep. So menace, haste, and death touch. What else we got? That's all I got right now. I'd put my 3 at menace, haste, and death touch. And it would take me a long time to think of a 4 and 5, so I'm not going to.
That's all right.
This whole episode for me to sit here just going.
Yeah, we had 45 minutes in our last episode to talk about it and come up with a list. So can't expect you to do it in 2 minutes.
Yeah. So I think I want to spark a little debate with you here. You said haste, and I don't know if I agree with haste, only because while it is powerful and important, once it goes around, it doesn't matter anymore. You know what I mean?
That's true.
What do you think about haste?
I was initially seeing Nick's side, but now that you presented how, at least in your meta, it seems that there's a lot of removal. So for us, that's mass removal isn't that prevalent. It's more targeted removal, whereas for you, apparently it's a lot of mass removal, so you need to get that combat damage in first. So for you, I guess that can be true that haste is, but for me, it wouldn't be in my top 5.
I put it there because it's ultimately a finisher. It's essentially a combo piece. When you there was a little bit of a deck building challenge I ran into recently when I was building a Hydra Tribal Urlock deck where I had 2 cards that I had to fit in the ability to give all my creatures haste and give them all trample and a buff. And I was trying to think of a way that wasn't Finale of Devastation into a Crater Hoof effect. But it ended up being Finale of Devastation into a Crater Hoof effect because that's all I could think of. But it's the haste is a finisher. There was another thing that I ran into with the Selesnya deck that eventually had Hazazon at the helm. The fact that I had no way to just swing in once I have all these creatures, and quite often somebody would get to there and be like, all right, I'm going to cast Wrath of God. And I'm like, great, back to square one. But having access to digging up, I had Samit, I think it was Samit the Tested. No, that's the Planeswalker. The Samit that gives everything haste. Having that in the deck, being able to fetch that out at instant speed if needed to or something and just swing in with all my stuff at once, at least I get that damage in.
Yep.
And I have stuff like that. So maybe haste, you guys don't treat it as in a vacuum that great, but in the grand scheme of things, it's more of a combo piece than anything. And that's why, to me, it's so powerful.
I think it got bumped down the list because we found things that we thought were more important than haste. Should we talk about our list? What we had on our list?
Yeah, a couple of our things. We agreed with you on Death Touch.
Yep.
Absolutely. It's such a deterrent for your opponents because they don't want to swing at you and lose their creature. We said Indestructible as well, because you don't have to worry about any combat damage with that. Like, you both play Crewfix, so I'm sure when you get to swing or block with Crewfix, you love having that Indestructible on the creature so it can just stay. We said Protection. We counted Protection as a keyword, because it can make it unblockable. It can save it from a board wipe, things like that. What else do we have on there? Flying?
I think Flying was on there and Trample.
Yeah, we wanted to get some sort of evasion and combat damage like you. So for us, Trample is more important than Haste would be, but I think those might be a little interchangeable for us.
It probably depends on the deck. Like, if your entire deck is 1/1s, then Trample isn't going to do anything, and Haste might come in handy. But if your entire deck is like a handful of 9/9s, then you're going to want Trample versus Haste with those things. So.
Fair.
And I think a lot of the difference between our list is that we normally only play 1v1, with COVID and whatever. But I'm sure you were saying you play with 3 other people most of the time, 4-player commander. So I think that's where we differ, where Haste in 1v1 isn't as bad as when there's 3 people before it gets back to you. So I'll
agree with that.
Yeah, okay. Absolutely. We used to be able to get together with multiple people, but as you know, you had to shrink down your bubble, and Magic at least in person, took a hit.
And I think that's why we all started doing YouTube, is because we could, share this safely.
Yeah.
And
look, we get to connect with more people than we would have. So
right.
Great to have you here, Shane.
I've met a lot of people starting this YouTube channel. Definitely a lot of fun. Though I would admit a tad bit time consuming. Editing is not the quickest or easiest thing to do in the world.
I'm very fortunate because I work in a TV station, so it's my job to do this with Mike. He's a producer in the community, and it's my job to help him do this. So that we're very lucky in that regard.
Absolutely.
But we understand that it is a big...
I'm just a scrub that's just like, all right, how do I make the card move from this side of the screen to that side of the screen? And it takes hours to figure that out.
Oh, yeah. Send me an email. I'm more than happy to help you figure those things out.
All right.
Cool.
Neat. Well, Shane, we're getting towards the end of our questions list here. We have one last thing for you. I would love for you to make a bold claim about magic. Whatever this means to you, I'll give you mine first, just so you have something to work off of. I've said in a previous episode, I think that magic will have a set in space by 2023, 2024. Sometime around there, they'll advance their plane into the universe, out into outer space, and we'll see things like maybe there'll be instead of a snow-covered island, like a zero gravity island or something like that, other effects like that. I don't know. I think it's something that they should and could explore. So that's my bold claim. I'm interested to hear if you have anything.
Bold claim.
How cool would it be to see a cyclonic rift with a black hole picture on it, a reprint?
That would be pretty neat. That would definitely be pretty cool. I think my bold claim for Magic as a whole would be, I don't want to go
really hard question.
Bold and then not like stand behind it. I want to go bold and also have like a true belief that this could be a thing. I think white's going to catch up. My bold claim here is I think white's going to catch up to the other colors in the very near future, within the next year or two, and possibly surpass, maybe not green, but might surpass blue and might end up being one of the second best colors in Commander.
Wow.
I
can see that because it seems like they're doing a lot of setup right now, and there just needs to be those really important pieces that we haven't got yet. That's gonna power white up.
Awesome. That's a very bold claim.
I'm curious to see when that will happen. I think I agree with you, so I'm excited to see it happen.
I think that's gonna be within the next 2 years. I think a lot of good white stuff's gonna come out.
Great.
Cool.
I can't wait because I got some white decks that need some pumping up. Shane, we'd love to move into our favorite segment on the channel, which is Common Goods. Nick, what is Common Goods? Tell them about the segment.
So Common Goods, we created this because everyone's talking about these beautiful rares and mythics, but the commons aren't getting the love that they deserve. So we devoted this segment to choosing a common each time we do a show and just talking about how great it is and why it should be in a lot of decks, certain decks, whatever.
Totally. And we've asked Shane to select the common good for today. So, Shane, what have you chosen? Read it for us, please.
I have selected from Theros Beyond Death, Mindrack Harpy.
Great. Would you mind reading it for us? Do you have it up?
I'll bring it up here, and then I will read it.
Great.
Mindrack Harpy is 3 and a black for a 3/2 enchantment creature Harpy. It has flying, and at the beginning of combat on your turn, each player puts the top 3 cards of their library into their graveyard. I'm pretty sure that has been errated since to be each player mills 3 cards, but it's essentially repeatable mill.
Triggered mill. Yeah.
Triggered mill.
Which is pretty neat. Harder to interact with.
Mm-hmm.
That's very cool. Does this card make it into any of your decks?
It did. In fact, it's on this list today because it solved a problem I ran into with a couple of my decks, actually.
Oh, okay.
mainly Gen. Gen is the Mardu Enchantress commander that you can pay Mardu and tap it to exile or sacrifice an enchantment and bring one back from your graveyard. The problem is it really promotes graveyard synergies, and blue is probably the best self-milled color, with green actually having a couple hints as well, and black coming in third into it. So I needed to find a way that I could make sure that the graveyard in this deck was consistently filled, so I'd always have targets for Gen's ability. And Mindwreck Harpy fit that requirement quite nicely, because not only does it mill you, it mills everyone else, which can interfere with their game plans, and it itself is also an enchantment. So it can be a target for Gen's ability once it's put its use in. It could be brought back with Gen if you really need to start filling the graveyard again. And it just comes in really handy. And I think in Gen decks in particular, this thing is very much an all-star.
That's good to know. We have a friend who plays Gen, so maybe we'll never tell him about this card.
Yeah.
If he's not playing it yet, don't tell him. His deck is a little bit better when he does.
Cool. I thought of a commander while you were talking about enchantment strategies. Ephemia the Cacophony from Theros, same set. Beginning of your end step, you can exile an enchantment from your graveyard and create a 2/2 zombie. So maybe after you've used that Mindwreck Harpy and it's gone into the graveyard, you can cash it in for Ephemia's ability as well.
Yep, there's not a lot of Ephemia decks out there. Liz has one. It's a lot of fun, actually. I think that she gets a bad rap because I know when she first came out, places like the Command Zone were saying, Euphemia's bad, don't play her. They're wrong. She's a lot of fun. But yeah, definitely would fit nice and neatly in there as well, because it's got flying, which is the type of evasion that you guys were talking about earlier, so being able to fly in. A lot of people have a hard time blocking flyers, so that's 3 damage. And when it does die in Euphemia, you can just eat it and get a zombie out of it. So.
No, I agree. I think I'm glad to hear the deck examples you had, because other than just plain self-mill or milling your opponents, I was having a hard time finding a place for it to fit in. But the more and more you've talked about it, I'm totally on board.
Definitely. Cool card.
Sometimes it's not so much that it outright is the greatest at one particular thing, but it does several things pretty decent enough that it just plays well in some very specific builds. So
great.
Mindwreck Harpy again, play very nicely.
Great.
Awesome.
Cool. Well, Shane, those are all the questions, all the segments that we have today. We'd love for you to kind of give yourself a little plug. Where can our viewers find you?
All right. I am Chain from Chain of Commander, where you can find me on YouTube at youtube.com/chainofcommander. I can be found at Twitter at Chain_Commander, because Chain of Commander had one too many characters in it. I can also be found on Instagram at Chain of Commander, and any of those 3, I have links to my link tree as well, where you can just really find all the other ones. So just, I'd say, find me on YouTube. Easiest place to find me, Chain of Commander. Hit the subscribe button. There's a little bell icon too. Do what you want. You're your own person.
You won't regret it.
Go check that out.
Yes. And Nick, where can they find us?
They can find us at themanadorksmtg.com, at themanadorksmtg, everywhere except TikTok, because TikTok is the Mana Dorks, because we made that one first. And I think that's
all we got. Shane, we really, really appreciate you joining us today. Love hearing your thoughts, and we'd love to keep this conversation going, so we'll definitely be in touch.
Oh, yeah, for sure. If you guys ever want me back on, this was a lot of fun. And definitely get those games in. So once you guys get set up for Spell Table, let me know.
Yeah, we'll totally do that. We'd love to play a game or two.
Awesome.
Excellent.
Great.
Well,
Shane,
thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
We appreciate it.
Goodbye, everybody.
See ya.